Hi, thanks for joining me. Today in this video, we're going to talk about backgrounds. And a background can make or break your painting. A background is a must-have in a painting. So before we begin, show some channel love by hitting the like and the subscribe button. Now, what do I mean when I say the background can make or break your painting? If the background, since it's basically, the background is usually the largest thing in the painting, it has to bring together everything in the painting and cause the painting to be one cohesive unit. Now, there are two types of backgrounds. With the watercolor wash, you're using a ton of water. All right, so we'll start with that one first. I'm going to use it here in this area. With the watercolor wash, you use, I'm going to use a little paint. I'm going to dip my paintbrush in the water and place it. It's watercolor, so see, it's like a wash. It's really watery. In this technique, you don't use as much paint. You use mostly water, like a watercolor wash, like you're washing the background. I've seen people use it like this, and then you can create this weird runny effect by allowing the paint to run. See those running effects? And if you want it to be a little bit more pronounced, you just come in with that and add a little bit more. There are grooves in the paint, in the canvas. So it's going to cause that run effect. You see that? That's a runny effect. That's a watercolor wash. That will tend to be a little messy, so make sure your surfaces are covered, and also that you can catch this paint when it comes down and wash it across, or you can just let it run completely off your canvas. That's the easiest technique. You must give it time to dry. Once the water dries, the paint is dry and it's fine. But it creates these nice looking areas of interest that you can't get any other way. All right, so the other way is we're going to do the cloud effect. Here. Now, I want to say with the watercolor, you can use a different, let me show you. You're not stuck with just the one color. You can come in here and add a totally different color. I just put the blue on there, but you can come in here and add other colors, see? They'll mix and blend as colors normally do. So you're not stuck to the one color. So I wanted to make sure you saw that. I didn't want you to think that you had to have just one color on there. The cloud effect is going to be similar. And I can't remember, there's another, I call it clouds, but there's another, almost like a tie-dye kind of look to it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paint, and with this, you need a little bit more paint than water. It's watery. It is a little watery. It doesn't have to be super watery, but you add a little bit more water to it. And I'm not taking very much care with brush strokes and all like that, because that's not my intention here. Now I have that there. You take a piece of paper towel. This can also be done with a sponge. I take a paper towel, ball it up. I want this crumpled edge that's not flat. You don't want a flat edge, and then you blot it. You see that? You're not blotting the whole thing. You're just lightly blotting it to, you are blotting the whole thing or parts of it. You want to create that continuity throughout. So you'll blot the whole thing, but you're blotting it lightly just to take up some of the paint and not all of it. You're not trying to remove all of the paint, just enough to create interest. That's it. I think that's also maybe marbling. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've done that technique. These are techniques that are normally done on walls, which means I can come in with another color. I don't have to have one color on this either. I can come in with another color as well. And cause that same effect here and there. Put it down and then come in with your balled up paper towel and blot. So you don't have to have just one solid color. You want to be creative and create the color that you would like. And sometimes that comes from using a combination of paint colors. All right, so that's the cloud effect. And because it's so much water in it, you can still see it. I can still see the cloud effects on it. But if it has a lot of water like this, I could have used less water and I would have not had this problem of it looking like it has almost disappeared on me. So it's dried a little bit more and I'm gonna come back. Each time you come back, you're lifting up more paint. So you don't want to lift up too much, but you want to lift up just enough to get the effect that you want. I think that removed enough that it should not close in again. Remember this canvas, so it has divots in it where there'll be little pockets of water in there. All right, let's move on now to the other one, which is similar to the clouds. It is going to be done with plastic. We're going to use plastic. And the plastic will be balled up. It can be either, as you notice, I'm not using clean water, so I don't need to. I'm just demonstrating this background. I'm going to use part of a grocery bag here and ball it up because, again, you need those uneven areas. You don't want it smooth. You just want it uneven. These are, this makes it easier. If you're trying to create this, elements of design tell you to vary your mark making. And so to vary your mark making, sometimes we overthink that. Doing it this way, you don't have to think. Just kind of do it. So with this, I have my paints here. I do this similar to making background noises, except we're going to do it so much so that it looks like the cloud one. So here we go. We're going to, you can either dip it in the water first, or you can dip it in the paint first. I'm going to come here. I'm going to cheat. I got 2 colors on there. I'm going to put a third on there. So I have 3 colors. You can see that. I have the 3 colors on here. Now I'm going to dip it in the water. Shake it. Let me show you. Dip it in the water. Shake it. And twist. I twist this as I go because I have 3 colors on here. See, I want all 3 colors on there. The white is in there. You can't see it that much, but it's going to cause an effect on these different ones. This is the easy way to do it. Otherwise, you got to go back. You can do 1 color at a time. I don't recommend that. And then you dab it enough to create the look that you want. So I'm staying within these lines. If this was a canvas, you go over the edges. But you can see all 3 colors in here. You see white, you see the dark blue and the light blue. So that's using the plastic. And again, it can be whatever type plastic you have handy. You don't have to go out and buy anything extra. These are just, we're just dealing with the background so that we can create continuity throughout the painting. All right, now I'm going to use these same colors and we're going to do the photography type background. That consists of making small X's. Going to make crisscrosses or X's. That's what you're going to do, back and forth, back and forth. Generally, I use 3 to 4 colors. I have a base color and then 2 extra colors. And one of those extra colors is generally a white plus something else so that you can go from the dark to the light. This just takes a little getting used to. You don't want to blend the colors, but you want the colors, they'll blend in certain areas and they'll stand out in other areas. And that's the whole purpose of this. You can start, I use a brush, depends on the size of your canvas because this is a background. So you use a brush, a good size brush. I would never use something this small. It would make creating the background extremely tedious. So you use a brush that's fairly a good size, at least a 1-inch brush. Now, if it was a teeny tiny thing, I probably would use something, but this I think is like an 5x7, an 8x10. I would still probably use this size brush. So I'm going to take the darker color first, put it on the brush. I want you to see what I'm doing. I'm making X's. Now, what you will end up doing is you'll make some X's, then you'll come back in with the other color. When you make these X's, you're not completely covering the canvas. So we have some empty spaces. When I come back with my next color, I'm going to place it in the empty spaces, but it's going to naturally hit some of these other spaces, which is fine. It's going to be okay. The trick to this is to make sure your paints are wet enough so they'll blend when they touch, but you are not blending them. So now I have some paint. I'm going to put some more down just to make sure it's still wet. I don't know if you can see through there. You see these little divots of white that's showing through? That's because it's canvas. One thing you can do with this technique before doing the X's is scruff it. You just scruff it in there. You see how I scruff the paint in there? I'll scruff the paint in on this side because I'm getting into those dips of the canvas. Now here I have the paint on there with the same dirty brush. I'm not going to dip my brush in water while doing this canvas background or this technique for the background. When using this technique, it requires no water whatsoever, just wet paint. So now I'm going to take one corner of the brush and dip it in this lighter blue and the other corner and dip it in the white so that it's like that. And then I'm going to come back and use that same crisscross motion for these little areas here. I'm going to crisscross, crisscross. See, I put it in the empty space and it touched these other ones, and that is fine. I'm not intentionally blending them. I'm using the same size crisscross markings. Also, I'm using a flat brush so that it covers a wider space. You don't want to use a round brush for this. So I'm using a flat brush. Now I'll come back and get some more of that straight blue that I had. And now I'm looking at empty spaces. I'm filling empty spaces. I'm covering the entire canvas background, so I don't want any empty spaces. So this is my second pass of color. I dip one corner, the other corner, and now I'm going to come here in areas that are empty again. And now I'm going right, I'm going to dip my corner in my two colors, and I'm going to come right over where I was at before. Notice I'm working outward whether it's in a circle or making a square, I'm working outward from one area. I'm not trying to cover the entire canvas at one time. This area is growing. And then I'll come back to it and assess to see if it's too dark, too light, or whatever. But that's how I want to do that. When you work with this technique and you're not used to it, it really doesn't look right. One thing you must know is the acrylic paints, even if it's oil paints, the paints are blending together. So as they blend, you give them a chance to do whatever it's doing in here, and you'll still be going out and around. So I'm going to go ahead and do to this area what I did to this one. So I scruff that there. If I came in with this and scruff this, well, let's put some on both sides and scruff it. I can lightly scruff it, but if I scruff it too much all over, I will lose that dark color in the background. And then you would just come in and scruff some more of the darker color around. And sometimes you just have to reapply it here and there. Now, once I scruff the first layer, when I come in with the second layer, I'm not going to work too hard. I would also let that layer dry. I would just come in here. I'm adding some here and there with a nervous, twitchy hand, here and there, here and there. And now I'm going to come back. See what it does to your brush? It's all looks all beat up. That's what scruffing does. So if you're going to use the scruffing technique, you can use a boar bristle brush. That's a stiff brush that you normally use for oil painting. I would use that type of brush if you're going to scruff it. It's going to wear the brush down like a fingernail file would wear your fingernail down. So whatever brush you're going to use for scruffing, use it just for scruffing. I tend to use an old paintbrush for scruffing instead of my new paintbrushes. So once my paintbrush gets a little old and the bristles kind of go where they want to go, I use that brush for scruffing. So now I just added, see, I added more dark blue, and I see light blue in there, but not a whole lot. So I'm going to come one corner white, one corner blue. This one, with this technique, sometimes you have to forego the doing it on both sides at one time. So you saw me go one side and then the other side. I'm placing, I put some white in there, then I put some of that blue in there. And that way you don't have to do it all at once. But when I look at it, this is a little lighter here. It's a little light in there. I want the light in there, but I don't want it white and overpowering. So I come in, I add a little more darker color there, and you still get that effect there. So I'm going to clean this off my brush. So I want that flat shape of my brush back. And then we'll continue here. So when I look at this, it is all of the strokes seem really pronounced. I can come back with the corner of the brush and do those X's all around, lightly, 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 just the corner. I'm using just the corner of the brush, lightly, lightly, going over the entire thing. See there, it's putting just enough paint. It's taking just enough paint off of here. The paints are not dry, so I get it when it's almost dry, but not quite. See how it's still depositing paint out here? Now, if I think it's too dark in here, I may come over here and get just a little of that blue or just a little of that white and put it in there, right in there, lighten up that area. If I think this is too light, I come over here with that darker color and put just a little. These strokes that I'm making are much X's. The X's that I'm making for this now are much smaller than when I laid the color down the first time. So now it's hinging on the darker blue side. I see that lighter blue in here around the edges, and this is a darker blue. So it's up to you if you want it on the dark side or the lighter side. These are the colors that you pick. So I have a dark blue, a lighter blue, and a white. I always have my base color, a white, and another color. This could have been red. If I would have made this red, the background would have turned to a purple to a lavender color. If I would have put yellow in here, the background would have turned to a green color. And then it would be light green, dark green, depending on how much of the yellow and the white that I added into the painting. So those are your effects, your faux effects for your background. Scruff in, these are almost the same, but in looking at them, you can see a difference. It just depends on what you like and what you don't like. If you do these backgrounds with the cloud effect, the watercolor wash effect, or the effect with the plastics, and you don't like them, you can always come back over with one of these paints here. These painting techniques here, they require a lot more paint than the other two. So they would offer more coverage than the other. You can't put a watercolor wash on top of these because these have a much thicker layer of paint than the watercolor wash did. In the cases where you do that and you don't like the background, if you did this and you didn't like the background at all, you wanted to go with another background, you can just paint over this whole background, this whole technique or style. Whatever this is, you can just cover it. We use to re-gesso the whole thing and start all over. It's not necessary. You can just use paint over the whole thing, white paint. They have some white paints that are thick enough to offer coverage, and you can just put a layer of paint on top of that and start over. Because if this was oil paint, you can't put, if this was oil paint, yes, you could. You're just using oil paints. Don't worry about that part. But these are background. These are your background and how you're doing your backgrounds. Some people do their backgrounds before they put a sketch onto the surface of the canvas, and you can do that. I tend to put my sketches down, then put a background on that I feel is appropriate. With these two backgrounds, also with this one, with the plastic background and the background that you use scruffing, or with the X's like the photographer studio, you can create a calm or a busy, anxious effect. With those two, you can make it where the background is calm, serene. Even though you're using these different colors, you can make that, create that effect by adding more colors. These are sort of toned down. I can come back in here and make it busier, so to speak, more pronounced, busyness. More pronounced busyness. Now I'm going to come in with the other color. And then I come in with the white. It just makes it busier. And this is much busier looking than this. So it's up to you how you want to do it. You're still just using X's. And creating that effect. All right. Hopefully that is helping you some. Until next time, thank you for joining me.